Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise, get straight to the insights, and today we're doing a deep dive into the Iran-Israel conflict. It's a topic that, let's be honest, can feel overwhelmingly complex, always shifting in the news. So our mission, really, is to take the stack of sources we've gathered, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, and maybe uncover some surprising facts about how this all escalated, especially in 2024, and how it's still evolving now in 2025.
Exactly. And this isn't just about, catching up on headlines for you. It's more about understanding the deeper dynamics at play. We're going to trace this journey from, believe it or not, an unexpected alliance all the way to open hostility. We'll look at the key events, the players involved, and crucially, the global ripple effects, because this affects more than just the region.
Okay, let's unpack this then, and maybe start with something that might surprise you, listeners. Did you know Iran was actually one of the first Muslim-majority countries to recognize Israel?
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it now. Back in 1948, most Muslim nations in the area refused to acknowledge the new state. But Iran, along with Turkey, they were the notable exceptions.
So what did that recognition look like? Was it just on paper?
Oh, no, not at all. It was, surprisingly extensive and very pragmatic, especially under the Shah, before the 79 revolution. Their relationship was really quite robust. We're talking agriculture, oil, military cooperation, even intelligence sharing. Think Mossad and Savak working together.
Really? Mossad and Savak?
Absolutely. And get this, Iran actually supplied Israel with crude oil after the Arab boycotts following the Six-Day War. They even had joint military projects. There was one called Project Flower, focusing on missile development.
Wow. Missiles.
Yeah.
Together.
Yep. And commercially, things were buzzing too. Israeli construction companies were active in Iran. You had direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. In fact, there's still about $1 billion that Israel technically owes Iran for business done before the revolution. That debt's never been settled.
It's just, it's hard to square that with the situation today, isn't it? So 1979... what happened? What was the catalyst that just shattered everything?
Well, the Islamic Revolution. Ayatollah Khomeini. That fundamentally changed everything almost overnight. Iran adopted this really sharp, unwavering anti-Israel stance. All official ties were cut. They wouldn't accept Israeli passports, banned travel to what they called occupied Palestine.
And the embassy in Tehran.
Famously handed over to the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. A huge symbolic gesture. Khomeini branded Israel the enemy of Islam, the little Satan. The U.S. was the great Satan.
So this wasn't just words then?
No. This ideological shift directly led to Iran sponsoring armed groups. Hezbollah in Lebanon, that started in '82. Then the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza. They formed what Iran calls the axis of resistance.
Right. But you mentioned some covert ties persisted, even after all that.
Yeah, it's one of those complexities. Despite the public hostility, there were still some, let's say, pragmatic, hidden interactions. Israel even provided some logistical support, sold arms to Iran during the Iran-Iraq War. Israeli advisors were apparently in Iran then, too.
Huh. Strange bedfellows.
Hey.
So, okay, this proxy conflict, this sort of shadow war, it simmered for decades. But then 2024 hits, and it becomes much more direct. Walk us through that escalation.
Right. 2024 was the turning point towards direct confrontation. It really kicked off on April 1st, the Damascus consulate strike. Israel bombed an Iranian consulate building in Damascus, Syria, killed 16 people, including some very senior Iranian officials like Quds Force Commander Mohammad Reza Zahedi.
Okay, a major hit. Iran must have reacted strongly.
They vowed revenge immediately. And less than 2 weeks later, April 13th, Iran's IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Navy, seized an Israeli-linked container ship, the MSC Ares, in the Strait of Hormuz, boarded it with helicopters.
So seizing ships, consulate bombings, and then came the missiles.
Exactly. That same weekend, April 13th and 14th. Iran and its allies, Hezbollah, Houthis, Iraqi groups, launched this massive barrage. About 300 drones plus ballistic missiles aimed at Israel.
300? That's huge. How did Israel handle that?
Well, there was a big international effort. The U.S., the UK, Jordan, they intercepted over 100 of the drones. France sent its navy. Saudi Arabia and the UAE apparently provided some intelligence to help Israel. The actual damage inside Israel was relatively minor, some damage at Nevatim Air Base. Tragically, a young Bedouin child was critically injured. About 30 others had minor injuries. But the message was clear. Iran could and would strike Israel directly.
So Israel had to respond to that, presumably.
They did, but maybe with some restraint initially. On April 19th, Israel struck back. Targets near Isfahan airport in Iran, including a military base, a radar site linked to the Natanz nuclear facility. Satellite images confirmed damage. Analysts at the time thought, okay, maybe this is limited. Maybe they're trying to de-escalate now.
But it didn't stop there, did it?
No, the calm was temporary. Fast forward to July 31st, 2024. Two key assassinations, allegedly by Israel. Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh killed in Tehran. And hours earlier, Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr was killed in Beirut.
Haniyeh killed in Tehran. That's incredibly bold.
Extremely. And predictable retaliation followed. Iran and Hezbollah both pledged revenge. And on October 1st, 2024, Iran launched a second wave of strikes, around 200 ballistic missiles at Israel, citing those assassinations.
And Israel hit back again.
Yes. On October 26th, Israel retaliated with another round of strikes inside Iran, near major cities this time, Tehran, Mashhad, Karaj, and also targets in Syria.
Okay, so 2024 established this pattern. Direct hit, counter hit, testing boundaries. Dangerous. But 2025 seems to have been a different level entirely. What pushed it into what people are now calling the Iran-Israel war?
Yeah, 2025 marked a definitive shift into, well, full-blown war. It really began June 13th, 2025. Israel launched a large-scale surprise attack. This wasn't just retaliation anymore. They targeted key Iranian military and nuclear facilities.
These facilities. That's crossing a major line.
Absolutely. And it included targeted assassinations or attempts on top military leaders, nuclear scientists, even politicians involved in nuclear talks like Ali Shamkhani, plus widespread airstrikes on facilities trying to take out Iran's air defenses.
How did Iran respond to that level of attack?
Swiftly. The very next day, June 14th, they launched missiles at military sites and cities in Israel. Tragically, one missile hit a house in Tamra near Haifa, killed a woman, injured 13 others.
Terrible. And it didn't stop there.
No. June 19th, Iran launched another missile barrage. This one specifically targeted the Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba, caused injuries, significant damage, and there was even a suspected chemical leak, forcing them to evacuate patients, hitting a hospital. That's another level.
And the U.S. role changed then, too.
It did. Up until then, the U.S. had primarily been focused on defending Israel. But on June 22nd, 2025, the U.S. took offensive action itself, striking 3 Iranian nuclear sites. That prompted the Houthis in Yemen to declare a declaration of war by the U.S., and they started firing missiles at Israel, too.
Wow. So it became a direct, multi-party conflict, U.S. involved offensively, Houthis joining in, a completely new chapter. What does this tell us about the actual military tech involved? We hear about Iron Dome, but what about Iran's capabilities?
Well, let's look at that. Israel's Iron Dome, we know it's been around since 2011. It's the short-range system designed to intercept rockets, artillery, drones, cruise missiles, very sophisticated, a real cornerstone for them. But Iran has been working hard to counter it. They've developed some pretty advanced missiles.
Like the hypersonic ones we hear about.
Exactly. The Fatah 2, for instance. It has what's called a hypersonic glide vehicle, an HGV. This thing can maneuver at like 5 times the speed of sound, makes it incredibly hard to track and intercept. Iran claims it could hit Israel in just 400 seconds.
400 seconds. That's not much warning time?
Not at all. And they also have advanced cruise missiles like the Hovizah. These fly low, they can change direction, kind of sneak under the radar, making them tough for air defenses too.
Okay, so both sides have significant capabilities. But looking back at how 2025 unfolded, you mentioned Israel's surprise attack. It seems Iran might have, well, miscalculated somewhere along the line leading up to that. What were the key misjudgments?
That's a really critical point. There seems to have been a pattern of Iranian miscalculation. First, they seem to have fundamentally misread the U.S.-Israel relationship. They saw the public American criticism of Israel over Gaza and maybe interpreted that as a deeper strategic split. They might have thought Washington would actually block or seriously discourage a major Israeli attack on Iran.
So they underestimated the underlying coordination.
It appears so. They misjudged the depth of that coordination and perhaps Israel's willingness to act unilaterally and its actual capability to do so effectively. Second, they underestimated Israel's reach inside Iran. Even after things like the Haniyeh assassination in Tehran, they seem to assume Israeli intelligence was too stretched thin after October 7th to pull off complex operations deep inside Iran.
They didn't connect the dots.
It seems not, which leads to the third point. Ignoring strategic patterns. They treated assassinations, like those of Hezbollah commanders, maybe as isolated incidents. They didn't seem to fully grasp it as part of a broader, integrated Israeli strategy of infiltration, preemption, and degradation of their capabilities.
And you mentioned the situation in Syria playing a role.
Yes, the domino effect. The collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria, which was significantly accelerated by Israeli strikes and internal defections, was a huge blow to Iran. It disrupted their supply lines to Hezbollah, undermined their regional deterrence posture. But Iran seemed slow to adapt, clinging to older assumptions. Israel exploited that lag, moving fast with this multi-pronged campaign that Iran just wasn't prepared for.
So a combination of misreading the players and failing to adapt to the changing strategic landscape.
Okay.
Beyond the military tactics and strategies, what about the wider world? How has this conflict rippled outwards? What are the economic, the humanitarian costs people should know about?
The global impact has been pretty significant, especially on energy markets, as you'd expect. Brent crude oil prices jumped about 11% just in a few days in mid-June 2025. And analysts are saying, oil could easily cross $100 a barrel if this crisis drags on.
Which hits everyone's wallets.
Directly. And it fuels stock market volatility. We saw major indices, S&P 500, NASDAQ, European markets like the DAX in Germany, CAC 40 in France, all take a hit after that big Israeli attack on June 13th.
And the Strait of Hormuz, is that still a concern?
A major one. There are serious warnings that Iran might try to close it. That's a choke point for, 25% of the world's oil supply? And a huge chunk of LNG shipments, too. Closing it would cause severe disruption, massive price spikes.
And that feeds into inflation globally.
Exactly. Higher oil prices mean higher production costs for almost everything: food, clothes, chemicals. So you get higher inflation, slower economic growth, especially hitting countries that import a lot of oil. Plus, we saw the aviation sector scrambling. Airlines like Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways had to suspend or reroute flights. Iran and Jordan closed their airspace temporarily. That creates real safety concerns, too.
Okay, so broad economic pain. What about specific countries? You mentioned India earlier, given its ties. How are they being affected?
India is facing several challenges. Trade-wise, it's higher shipping costs, these war surcharges on insurance premiums, that hurts. Indian exporters, especially for things like basmati rice and tea that Iran buys a lot of, are worried about demand dropping.
Yeah.
And then there's the Chabahar port project in Iran. That's really important for India's strategy to connect to Central Asia, bypassing Pakistan. The conflict has definitely set that back, impacting India's trade ambitions.
And the human side for India.
Yeah.
Citizens there.
Yes, there's a significant Indian population in Iran, estimated around 10,000 people, including about 4,000 students. So India launched Operation Sindhu on June 18th, 2025. It's a humanitarian evacuation mission. The first flight already brought back 110 students via Armenia. It really highlights the direct human impact.
Right. It's clear this conflict isn't contained.
Yeah.
But amidst all this chaos, the missiles, the economic fallout, has anyone actually won? It seems hard to say.
It really is. You have these competing narratives of victory, which is typical in these situations. The U.S., for example, claims it neutralized a potential nuclear threat with 0 American casualties. They point to setting back Iran's capabilities. President Trump even publicly thanked Iran for warning before they hit that U.S. base in Qatar, kind of framing it as Iran just needing to blow off steam.
Yeah.
He also made that bold claim of complete and total control of the skies over Iran.
Okay, that's the U.S. narrative. What about Israel?
Israel focuses on its operational successes, claiming they've significantly softened the Iranian military through their strikes. But they also face some pushback, remember? President Trump apparently wasn't happy when Israeli jets started bombing again just hours after a ceasefire was announced, so diplomatic pressure was there too.
And Iran's claim.
Iran focuses on survival and sovereignty. They argue they stood up to and struck back against a superpower and its main regional ally. They frame it as resilience, but the cost, as we've discussed, has been immense. Daily life disrupted, people displaced, the economy is hemorrhaging, as one source put it. Even some Iranian politicians are starting to admit their capacity to keep fighting is limited.
So everyone's spinning it their way, trying to control the story. What's the real bottom line here, do you think?
Well, Ali Veyes from the International Crisis Group had a pretty sharp take on it, he said, essentially. Every side now has a narrative for victory while avoiding the risk of stumbling into a larger conflict. It captures that dynamic well, I think. Everyone claims they won something, allowing them to step back slightly without losing face, perhaps.
But avoiding a larger conflict doesn't mean this one is over or that the costs weren't real.
Exactly. Despite the victory narratives, nobody really walked away untouched. This whole episode has just poured more fuel on the fire of regional rivalry, deepened the mistrust. It's all about strategic gamesmanship now, and the path forward looks, well, pretty foggy.
So this deep dive really shows that complex path, doesn't it? From this almost forgotten history of cooperation to open hostility. Then these direct clashes in 2024, and now this devastating war in 2025 with truly global consequences. It's a sobering reminder, really, of how interconnected everything is.
It really is. And it leaves us with a crucial question, one for you listeners to think about too. As everyone tries to navigate this ongoing conflict, how might those miscalculations we talked about, especially Iran, perhaps underestimating Israeli resolve and the international dynamics, how might that shape what comes next? Will it push towards diplomacy or could it trigger even further escalation? What do you think stands out as the most critical factor needed right now for any kind of de-escalation in this incredibly tense situation?
A lot to think about there.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has helped you feel a bit more informed about this critical and unfortunately ongoing situation.